Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Showing Up to Your Life podcast and YouTube channel. My name is Art Burns, as it always is, and as always, I am really excited to be here with you today to share some thoughts and some guidance and some exercises and practices that you can do to develop a sense of presence, a level of acceptance, and to allow yourself to let your heart lead you with compassion and with open curiosity. Because when we can achieve these sort of four concepts, everything changes and in really profound ways. And I'm living proof. I mean, I used to live in very, very much different ways from what I talk about now. And I was not a happy person. I was not a successful person. I had plenty of money and I had plenty of nice things, and I lived in a great apartment, and I had, lots of people around me who it looked from the outside, I'm sure, that I had it made, but inside I was not a happy person. I was not fulfilled. I was not living with any kind of purpose. I wasn't my own friend, is really what it comes down to. A colleague and friend of mine this morning actually posted that a lot of times when we talk about meditation, we teach people. He's also a mindfulness and meditation teacher. He's also happens to be a cardiologist, so it's pretty intense. His name is Jonathan Fisher, by the way. Just give him the credit. So he posted on Instagram this morning that and his tag or handle on Instagram is Happy Heart MD. So he teaches a form of mindfulness and heartfulness, which is very similar to what I teach as well. And when we teach people this work, especially meditation itself, a lot of times what we do is we talk about the stress reduction that you get from it. We talk about the enhanced awareness that you get from it, which leads to emotional intelligence. And we also talk about how, we build this muscle of the mind to improve our ability to focus, and all of these are really true, right? And I feel that that's kind of the way that people have to come into this work, because it has to draw you in with some sort of tangible result, right? Like, I want to reduce my stress for a better life. I want to have more emotional intelligence for, my personal and professional life. And I want to, be able to focus more, to sort of inhabit this body and live through this world in a way in which I can really pay attention to it and benefit from that, right? But really, and he was listening to some podcast, my friend Jonathan was, Dr. Fisher, and he said that it was, during this podcast, one of the guests or the host said something about how meditation is really about just becoming your own friend, right? It's becoming a friend with yourself, right? And that's really profound, because that is ultimately what we're talking about. The ability to be like comfortable with yourself and to accept yourself, right? And when we can accept ourselves, exactly how we are, right? Now, it doesn't mean that we don't want to improve things about us. Doesn't mean that we don't want to, get things in our lives and kind of set goals and achieve goals. There's nothing wrong with that. But acceptance of yourself first, exactly how you are, is what gives way to creating those goals and achieving those goals, and also gives way to accepting the circumstances around us, which again, that also, de-stresses us, increases emotional intelligence, and also allows us to be more focused. So it's really just an interesting thing how it all kind of comes together. And so I just thought I would share that real quick. But today, what I really wanted to talk about is I want to kind of go a little bit further on what we were talking about yesterday. As you know, with these videos and this podcast, I try to kind of string things, in a kind of progressive, pattern, so that each, podcast kind of builds on the last one and stuff. And so yesterday we talked about how, the world around us is not necessarily what we think, or it is what we think it is, right? In terms of, it exists within our nervous system, right? Which includes the brain, right? And all the, the central nervous system, which holds the memories and the understanding that we have of the world around us. And that's how we actually kind of create the world in a certain way around us. and it's very, very true the way that works. And so, but today I want to kind of take that concept and turn it around a little bit and talk about how that kind of comes the other way, right? So like, so yesterday we talked about how our understanding of the world, right, happens inside of us, right? So now I want to talk about how we impact or how we actually do not impact people on the way that we feel we do, in a similar kind of way. So basically what I mean by that is that, a lot of times we go through our lives thinking that, like, something that I have said or something that I have done has triggered the emotions of another, right? And that somehow I am responsible for what another person is feeling emotionally. Right? Now, of course, yes, it is very possible for you to say something very hurtful that has a direct emotional response from another person, right? That is definitely possible. But the degree to which that emotional response happens, and also in indirect ways, the way the emotional response happens, well, that's frankly just not yours. It's not something that we do to each other, and it's really kind of very helpful to understand that fact, right? Because again, a lot of times we might feel like, okay, so and so said this to me, and so now I'm upset. Right, and now I give myself license for being upset, or I'm embracing the upsetness of what I'm feeling. Like that's kind of the thought process that goes on about our emotions and how they're triggered sometimes. Right, it's certainly with some people, and so it's really interesting. And I've done some thought about this recently, and that's why I'm sharing it with you here today. In the context of what we were talking about, yesterday when I said like a green bush, like what you see as that green bush and what I see as that green bush, they might be very, very different from one another, but there's no way for either of us to know, right? Because the only thing we can do is say like, yes, it's a green bush, and so in a similar fashion, or in a similar perspective or a similar kind of way, I was thinking about the fact that, as I've told you here before, as I told you just a few minutes ago, I used to live very much anti-mindfulness, right, and anti-compassion. I was very, very much of the mind that that in order for me to win, someone else has to lose, right, and I was fully embracing that, right, like that was the way I lived, right, and I held no punches, right, and at that time I was kind of pretty angry a lot of times, and I'm not proud of it. I'm not saying this as a badge of honor in any kind of way, and it's sometimes it's hard to admit to how I used to live and how actually kind of cruel I used to be in certain circumstances. For instance, I mean, there's been plenty of poor servers in restaurants who, if I wasn't having my way, they were going to hear about it from me, and it was a tendency that I had. And again, I'm not proud of it, and I'm speaking from a place of courage and vulnerability that doesn't necessarily feel great, but I'm conscious of my feelings right now as I'm saying this, and I'm doing this with a bold courage because it's an important aspect for you to understand based on what I'm trying to get across to you. And so as this sort of angry person, I don't know how many of you, if you attended any of my Eventbrite webinars about stress reduction, you'll know that actually in my past, and this probably will seem very dissonant for you because you know me through these videos, and the person who I am now is completely different from who I was then, but I actually had someone name me, a former employee of mine actually, named a drink after me when I owned a small cafe many years ago. This woman was working for me, and like on her third or fourth day or something like that, she named a drink Angry Art, the Angry Art. And I don't even remember what was in it, but it was probably some kind of, I don't know, bitterness or something like that, or hot sauce or something, like cayenne pepper in a hot chocolate or something like that, or a cappuccino or something like that. But anyway, that's who I was at that time. I was Angry Art, and I was expressing my anger all the time. And so here's the thing that's really interesting about that, right, is that I again, not proud, and I'm like feeling my palms getting a little sweaty as I'm about to say what I'm about to say, but I used to yell at a lot of people. Like, let's just say it plainly. I used to yell at a lot of people. And again, I wish that I could go back and humbly and personally apologize to every single person whom I did yell at. And if you are one of those people who are watching right now, if that just happens to be the case, then please get in touch with me and allow me to give you the apology that you deserve. And I would love that opportunity, right? But yeah, I used to yell a lot. And so here's the interesting thing about that, though, is because it kind of set up a sort of, not really scientific, kind of setup for it, but it gave me the opportunity, gives me the opportunity now in retrospect to see how, the yelling was the constant, right? But the thing about that is that many different people reacted in vastly different ways to my yelling, right? So for instance, there would be one person, who I would yell at, and again, I can't even say can't even believe I'm saying this, because it feels so like, how could I have been doing that all those years? But unfortunately, it's just what it was, and there's nothing I can do to change it. So I accept it, and I move forward knowing that I don't yell at anybody anymore. Like, never, ever, ever now, right? Like, I'm an anti-yeller. Like, I would never yell at anybody, even people who have hurt me, and that has happened. But I react in compassion and empathy. I do not yell. But anyway, in the time where I would, it would be like, say, my wife, people who were working for me, people in cars, people in stores, I was just very quick at any given time to raise my voice and force force myself onto situations, right? And here's what I found, though, is that, some people, for instance, my wife, anytime that I raise my voice to her, she has a specific reaction, right? And her reaction to that raising my voice is she just shuts down. It's like she's a turtle. She just goes into a shell. She will, just get herself out of the situation as quickly as she can. She will go off into another room. She might cry, if I did that. And again, I'm not proud of this at all. And this really kind of, feels really, I don't know, it's cathartic, but it's also very uncomfortable to talk about this, and so I hope you can appreciate that. But yeah, it was like, so she would have that reaction, right? Where she would either like shut down or, kind of hide and make herself small. And sometimes she would cry, and she would just, and ordinarily she's a very tough person, my wife, which was always very frustrating to me, right? Because she's somebody who is very, very strong, right? But yet all it took was for me to raise my voice a little bit, and all of a sudden this strong, powerful woman was reduced to this like, little child almost, and then that would make me yell more, right? That's a different that's a topic for a different day, which I'm sure there's somebody out there who needs to hear about this, and we will talk about that. I'll make a note. But the fact of it, and I think we'll talk about that tomorrow, actually, because I realize I don't have something slated for tomorrow, so I got like the wheels are spinning here. But anyway, so that was how my wife would react, right? But then there were other people who would react a lot differently. Like, so some people might yell back, whereas even other people might turn to me and be like, "You're yelling at me? Go take a walk," and they would just leave, right? Other people would just, again, just like shut down and just become completely quiet, and I would never hear from them again, that kind of thing, right? And other people would even, maybe be compassionate about it, right? But the point is that, the yelling was the constant, right? Like, I was doing the same thing to every person, right? Like, it wasn't like I treated, it wasn't like I yelled at some people and didn't yell at others. I mean, of course, I wouldn't yell at people like bosses and stuff like that in my life, but everybody else was fair game, including my parents, including my children at one point, only for a couple of years, thank goodness, because, I discovered mindfulness when my children were very, very young. And so I was able to avoid a lot of that with them. But it did happen. It did happen during the terrible 2s and 3s of my daughter's life. There were times where I snapped and I said things that I wish I hadn't said in a way that I didn't want to say them. But again, the whole point of what I'm trying to say now is that everybody would react differently, even though my actions were pretty much the same across the board. And so what does this tell us? Right? In the same way that that green bush that we talked about, right, yesterday, the same way that green bush exists more inside my mind and my nervous system than it does in the reality. Like, yes, it is a real thing. It's there. It's a bush, no doubt. I can go and I can touch it. I can pick a leaf off it. And I can smell it. I can taste it. I can, hear the rustling of it. It's there. It is a physical thing out in the world. But the way that I perceive it, right, the color that it is, the texture that it is, the whether it's something that I find attractive or repulsive, all of that is all in here, right? And that's what I was saying yesterday, that like if I took a talking dog over there, and the dog talked to me back and says, it's not a green tree. I don't even know what you're talking about, this thing that you're calling green. It's a bush. It's gray like all the other bushes. What are you talking about, right? Or a bug like a bumblebee or a salamander or something like this. These animals have a much different spectrum of light that they're able to process and see, right? And so they would see this thing that I could never hope to see. Right? And so in the same way, right, because it was my nervous system that was processing this thing as a green bush, and that's what I've built my whole understanding of every bush on earth, right? In the same way, right, when somebody is emotionally triggered, it is not the person who is causing that trigger, right? On the outside, it is within the person, right? So in other words, no one is responsible for anyone's emotional triggers or anyone's emotions on any level except the person whose emotions we're talking about, right? Like it's an internal thing, and it's based on a lot of different factors. For instance, and this is something that's really, really helpful to kind of, especially as parents. As you all know, I do try to help parents with mindfulness because, again, in my life, once I was able to cultivate mindfulness, my parenting changed in a very profound and very positive way, right? And so this is something that I try to kind of talk to people about, to understand, like, what is your history and why is it that you feel the emotions that you feel, right? Because it's very personal to you. And I don't feel the same emotions. I feel happy and you feel happy, but it's like a green tree. What is happiness to you? Or a green bush? What is happiness to you, right? And we can only describe it in the language that we share. So therefore, I will never, ever know what happiness feels like to you. Right? Of course, the great authors and people who can really use language and words to express things, you might get a deeper understanding from someone like that. But just for, just people just talking to each other, there's no way for me to know what happiness is to you versus what happiness is to me, or sadness or anger or fear or jealousy or any of it, right? Like that's inside you. Right? And so therefore, so again, getting back to what I know about my wife, right, is that, she grew up with a very, very dominant alpha male, like her stepdad is a guy who is like a bona fide tough guy. And he was like, a scary dude. I mean, 6'5" or something like that, just always raging and just like that kind of guy. And that's who she grew up with, right? So in other words, someone who was always yelling at her, right? So therefore, the first sign of someone yelling at her, what she does is she becomes that little girl again, right? Who she was is this, big scary guy was, exerting his power over her for years and years and years and years. And that's why she has the reaction of a little girl, right? Or if you grew up like me, like if someone yells at me, 10 years ago, if somebody were to yell at me back then, before I was practicing mindfulness and empathy and compassion, I would yell back. Right? And the reason for that is because I grew up in a home where that was kind of the mode of communication, right? Like my mother yelled at me more often than she spoke to me, right? So therefore, if somebody yells at me, that's just communication. I don't feel hurt by it. I feel like, okay, let's get into this and let's do this, And so that's the thing, right? It's not the yeller that is causing the emotional reaction. It's the yellee that's causing the emotional reaction, right? The emotional reaction is happening based on your history, your patterns, your nervous system response that's been conditioned through all of these different things. Everything that's happened to you as a person in this life, but also everything that happened to your parents and your grandparents and their parents and grandparents. It goes all the way back, because the reason for that, right, is that, again, and I happen to know this too, that my mother's father was a very, very angry human being, and he would yell quite often as well. Chances are, and I don't know this for sure, but chances are I would be willing to bet money on the fact that my mother's father's parents were also very forceful and very temper driven and very, vocally angry and yelling all the time. And that's the thing, right? We grow up with it, right? So if you grow up in an environment in which, people are yelling at each other all the time, you are likely to become someone who yells at people. And that's because you're that's the unconscious nature of the human being, right? And that's what mindfulness is all about, right? Mindfulness is about bringing that awareness, okay? Taking that unconscious pattern and unconscious behavioral tendencies and bringing them to the conscious. And once they're in the conscious, we bring them from the implicit to the explicit. We bring them to the unaware to the aware. And when we do that, now we can work with them, because now we can make a conscious and intentional choice. Right? Now we can process that. So yes, it is very important to be aware of how you're talking to people, because ultimately that is still a trigger for someone, right? It's still the yelling that made this thing happen, but the degree to which that trigger happens is not on you as the person who yells. So in compassion and in empathy, we want to be aware of how our words and our actions, whether it's yelling or it's speaking politely or impolitely or being kind or unkind, whatever it is, right? It's important to be aware of how that's happening, right? Because yes, you are going to trigger people one way or the other, right? But that's not your fault, because you have no way of knowing that, right? So play it safe and be kind, right? Like that is ultimately the thing, right? Be kind to yourself, be kind to others. It's always the better way to go. Right? Even when you're in a position where you need to let your anger blossom a little bit, that does not have to be done in an unkind way, right? And we can talk about that in another episode, not tomorrow, but another one. I gotta try to remember what we're talking about tomorrow. But the point is that yes, be aware of that, but more so be aware of how you are reacting to others, and kind of acknowledging the fact that your reaction to the others, right, says much more about you than it says about that other person. Okay, and once we can, and that's part of emotional intelligence, right? Emotional intelligence is having the awareness that, okay, this person just yelled at me, now I'm having this reaction, right? Now, once I see that reaction, that is conscious and open and out there in the light, the explicit, the aware, now I can regulate that response, right? Now I can say, okay, this is the typical situation where I'm going to be in this, I'm going to be triggered this way. So let me, go excuse myself for a few moments and breathe for a few minutes and try to calm my nervous system down and so I can kind of get through whatever's going on, right? So I can handle my own triggers, right? Because again, so much of this, what we do is we put that onus on the other person, right? And again, yes, nobody should yell at each other, right? I'm not saying that that's a good thing, right? But it's so easy for us and so sort of habitual for us to say, well, you yelled at me, so now I'm feeling these emotions that I'm feeling. That's not how it works. You're feeling the emotions you're feeling based on your history, your genetic makeup, your implicit and unconscious, sensibility and understanding of the world. That's why you're feeling the emotions that you're feeling to the degree to which you're feeling them. Right? So this is kind of the bottom line of this post today, is to kind of talk about how, we can take ownership over that. And when we do, we take control over it. So we don't have to be subject to the whims of others. We don't have to give that emotional power to others, right? We can actually reclaim that power for ourselves. And in reclaiming that power for ourselves, we can take control, and we can consciously and mindfully walk through this life with control over our emotions, right? Not at the whims of whatever we happen to see. So that if somebody's nice to us, it's a good day. If somebody's mean to us, it's a bad day. You don't have to give up that power. You can remain in a good place no matter what people around you do, right? So understanding this gives you that power. I hope that makes sense to you. And if it doesn't make sense to you, please, I want you to get in touch with me, because this could be one of the I say this almost every day to myself at least, but this could be one of the most important messages I've ever delivered in this platform, right? Because this is the key to you having control over your own happiness, right? Because that's the bottom line of this, right? Is that your happiness is not some kind of fluke. Your well-being is not some kind of fluke. Your happiness, your well-being, your sense of purpose, your sense of fulfillment in this life is completely under your control, right? But if you give away your emotional reactivity based on this unconscious stuff, then you're not in control, and now you don't have that. Now your happiness is just a fluke at that point, right? Again, you'll be happy on a day where somebody says nice to you, and you'll be unhappy on a day where somebody says something not nice to you, right? You don't have to swing like that. You can maintain your happiness and your well-being in spite of whatever happens during the day. I love having these talks. Thank you for listening. And all of a sudden my palms don't feel sweaty anymore. I feel, good again. I don't feel, so nervous and kind of uncomfortable talking about my yelling and stuff. So that's cool too. And I'm bringing that awareness to myself. So if you enjoyed this talk, and you join the rest of the talks that I give here, you know what I'm going to ask you, okay? Do the YouTube things, do the podcast things, all the things. Please just do them. It takes just a few moments to like, share, subscribe if you haven't already, hit the notifications if you like, but I'm pretty regular here. I do this every single day, Monday through Friday. And what was the last thing? Oh, comment if you can. Just say hi. Just say, hey, Art, thanks. Something like that. I love it. I love the interaction with people, but YouTube loves it even more. And this will get the algorithm pumped up and supporting this podcast channel or this YouTube channel, and will get in front of more people. And you have no idea how many people out there who are angry and suffering from the stress and the emotional turmoil that I describe in a lot of these things. And some of these podcasts and YouTube videos could help them to control that and to live a happier life and a more fulfilling life, with a sense of purpose. All right. And I would love that. So please, if you could do that. And on the podcast side, it's just about, rate and review. Okay, so just give me however many stars you feel I deserve. Unfortunately, the maximum is 5, but give me as many as you think I deserve. And if you could write a couple of words in review, that would be awesome too. And anybody who has questions or wants to talk about doing some work around this topic or any of the topics that I talk about here, well, you know how to do that, right? By now I've told you many times. You just go over to my website, artburnscoaching.com, click on the button that says free phone consultation. I think basically that's a coaching session. So you can have a free coaching session, 45 minutes. It's usually I charge people around $100 for that. You know, actually some, yeah, I've recently been even a little higher than that. I'm trying to get to the point where I'm sustaining myself through a living here. So that's something that people pay $100 or more for that, and you can have it for absolutely nothing. And so take advantage of that while it's here for you. So go do it. And I'll talk to you soon. Thanks a lot, everybody. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.